This should be a pass.
Welcome and good evening to the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for September 20th, 2016. If we could call the roll, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Luce.
Here.
Councilmember Lehman.
Here.
Mayor Mars.
Here.
Councilmember Whiting.
Here.
Councilmember Mokel.
Here.
Thank you very much. Let's stand all for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 3, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes, adds, deletions? Mr. Reynolds?
No, Mr. Mayor, there are no additions, deletions, alterations, or corrections.
Councilmember Whiting?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I have a motion and a second by Councilor Mokel. Discussion, discussion, discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. Item number 4, consent agenda. Are there any adds, subtractions, deletions, everything on consent? Councilmember Luce?
B1.
B1. Others? Councilmember Lehman?
Move the consent agenda as modified.
I have a motion. Councilor Luce, would you like to second that?
Not really.
Okay. Councilor Mokel?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second by Councilor Mokel. Before we vote, we'll have a reading of the modified agenda. Mr. Reynolds?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The following are the consent agenda items for September 20th of 2016. 4A1 adopts resolution number 7770, which accepts work on the 2014 street reconstruction project number 2014 TAC 1. 4A2 adopts resolution number 7768, which accepts work on the Patterson Drive storm sewer improvements project number 2015 TAC 8. 4C1 approves the payment of bills and electronic transfers in the amount of $1,802,550.10. 4C2 adopts ordinance number 939, which amends the adopted 2016 fee schedule. 4C3 grants a massage therapy license and a massage therapist license to Amber Angel at 287 Marshall Road, Suite 101. And 4C4 adopts resolution number 7769, which declares the amount to be assessed, orders the preparation of processed assessments, and set public hearing date for delinquent garbage refuse bills.
The consent agenda modified has been read. Further discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. The modified consent has been approved. Now I'd like to call on any citizen that would like to come forward and speak on an item not on the agenda. Please come forward. State your name and address for the record on an item not on the agenda. Seeing none, moving ahead then. I have a question of order here. I don't see a place to consult for the consent agenda, removal of the consent agenda items, if any, so I think we would do that now. Would that be possible, Mr. Reynolds?
Yes, sir. My apologies. You're right.
No, not a problem. Is this a good place to accommodate that, or should we work it in later?
Yes, sir. We can do it now.
Okay. Let's add, or, just modify now that we'll look at B1, the Indoor Playground Vendor Company Award. And Mr. Luce, you had pulled this off. Councilor Luce?
Yeah, I'd like to see some inclusive equipment on this, in this playground or play area. We're building a real nice inclusive park for the children that need it and the adults. And what are they supposed to do in the wintertime?
Huh?
So,
I know this topic came up at the community center meeting the other night, which I attended, and now they're going to break into smaller groups, of which the playground is one, and tonight's agenda item for this is just to approve the vendor, not the design, or, is that correct, Ms. Policy?
It is
Polly?
correct. It is correct, yep.
Okay. And, Mr. Counselor Lehman,
2 questions. First, we've got basically a budget set on the portion of the referendum for this portion of it, so whatever's accommodated in that, but I'm in no favor of going over that budget, and I know inclusives are expensive, so we'll have to see how that pans out. My other question is, view 5 shows a wheelchair in the picture. Is that representative of what they build, or what they're capable of, or what they're looking at doing?
Ms. Polly.
Correct, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. These proposals, all these playground companies are ADA accessible, so that wheelchair in the picture that they're showing is just the fact that they're showing that they are accessible. There will be a number of components that are inclusive in this playground. We're gonna have some ramps, some tunnels, some different textures. There's music panels that we can put on. So there's a lot that we can do that isn't actually too much of an added cost. It would be part of the playground as it was designed. So, Mr. Mayor, you're correct tonight in that we're just asking for approval of the playground company. Next, we'll go back and we'll take all of the ideas that, they have a proposal. It's a basic proposal. We'll take it, we'll tweak it. We've got a whole packet of different components that they offer. We'll pick and choose which components that we like. We'll have them put a few designs together. And then, yes, we have our community input committee that will be looking at it for comment. We'll probably have some community meetings. We'll also invite our inclusive playground committee to come look at it. So there'll be a lot of community input before we get to our final design.
Okay, Councilmember Lewis.
I think if we decide on a company right now, we're gonna box ourselves in. We need to find out if these companies will work with anybody else's equipment.
Yes, they will. We have the space, so we will just buy from them what we want to, and then we will, if we find other equipment, for instance, I know that you had contacted Flagship Recreation, and they have a couple of components. I did reach out to Soft Play to ask them if we were to add that Omni spin in, for instance, which takes up a very big footprint of that space. He said that we would lose some space of our our structure, but it's doable that we could maybe build over top of it. So he's willing to work with us and try to fit it in. So yes.
Councilmember Lewis.
Yeah, the Omni spinner takes up too much room and it's too much danger with kids running around, I think. Needs a bigger setting. I think the roller slide would be the best one to put in this setting because it helps the autistic, it helps the cochlear implants, and then the average kid's never seen one, so they all go crazy for it.
Yeah, unfortunately, the roller slide is not something that indoor playground companies put inside of spaces because of the maintenance and the issues that they see with it. It's a little different than the outside, but I did contact him about that as well as the other company. So that is one item. We'll have to find other pieces that might go in with their pieces, but there are plenty to choose from. And I do feel confident. We did do an RFP, and I talked with multiple companies even before we did the RFP and told them our intentions. We've been working with this Inclusive Playground Committee for almost a year, and so I know very well that we want to include, pieces for that, both indoors and outdoors. Our outdoor playground is only going to be good, when there's not snow.
Councilmember Lehman.
Mayor, this recommended action talks about design and construct. Are we going to see the final design before construct?
Correct, yes, you will. But this would be the company we have from the very start to finish, but yes,
Okay.
you will.
Is there a normal course to go through the Community Center Input Committee and then Park and Rec and then come to us as a final design? Would that be a normal course?
Correct, yes, and we'll also include some other community input meetings as well, just for, like our Inclusive Playground Committee will be invited to look. We'll probably have it available for some community members and community center members as well. So yes, all of those will be combined as a recommendation to the Park Board, which will then come to you as
And
well.
if approved, their representative would be at those meetings?
We could have him here,
Yep,
correct,
that would be
yes.
great, helpful. That was what
Yes.
came out of that committee meeting the other night.
The soft play representative?
Yep.
Yeah, and he did attend the Park Board meeting at this last meeting to do a presentation as well.
Okay. Other questions? If not, thank you, Ms. Polly. Councilmember Whiting?
Make a motion to authorize the appropriate city staff to enter into the contract with Soft Play to design and construct the indoor playground at the Shakopee Community Center for in an amount not to exceed $150,000.
Councilmember Mokel, are you seconding that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I have a motion, I have a second. More discussion on this? It looks like we'll have the rep, it looks like they can handle this. This is a vertical playground, so, you know, a couple components will be inclusive. And I think that, I heard that the same concerns out of that committee the other night, and I think that can be done. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And follow-up question? All those against? Motion passes unanimously. Councilmember Lehman?
I guess it'd be a point of order. Does staff have a spare agenda? I left part of mine on the kitchen table.
Full agenda or just a sheet?
The budget, the levy portion, and the EDA agenda. I did read it. Matter of fact, I read it a couple of times, and there it was sitting on the table, and I walked out without it.
All right. So that, Councilmember Whiting?
Make a motion to recess for our Economic Development Authority meeting.
Council Mokel?
Second.
And further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. We are now in EDA. President Lewis.
I'd like to pass it off to Councilor Lehman. I am having some problems with my dentures.
Who's the vice president of the EDA?
We know who the vice chair is.
All right.
I'll accept Mr. Lehman as temporary vice chair, if not.
All right. Call the EDA to order for September 20th. Please note the roll. Motion to approve the agenda would be in order.
Make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Commissioner Mokel makes the motion, seconded by Mr. Myers. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Agenda includes the consent agenda, bill list.
Make a
Mr.
motion to
Whiting?
approve the consent business.
Motion by Mr. Whiting to approve the consent, seconded by Mrs. Mokel. Any discussion on the bill list? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Any other business to come before us? Mokel.
I'll make a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, October 18th, 2016 at 7 PM.
Motion by Ms. Mokel, seconded by Mr. Myers. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes.
Thank you.
New record.
Close.
We'll reconvene this city council meeting for September 20th, 2016. We'll move ahead then to 8-1, which is a 2017 property tax levies, general fund budget, debt levy cancellation, and Mr. Nelson will present.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I'm not sure if Mr. Reynolds, anything that you want to start with, or I'll dive right in, I guess. PowerPoint going here. Mayor and council members, this is pretty much the same information as we reviewed at the work session last week. I did want to go over it again for the general public as well too, so bear with me through this. There is some new additional information in here as well as some updates from that work session. So before you tonight is the request for reviewing the 2017 preliminary levy and budget for 2017. The City of Shakopee is required to comply with the statutory deadlines for submittal and certification of the preliminary property tax levy to Scott County before September 30th, 2016. The preliminary levy is the base budget for work that will be brought to the council in October and November for discussions on finalizing a final budget for approval in December. The preliminary levy is the maximum levy that can be certified to the county auditor in December. This amount cannot be reduced, or can be reduced, but cannot be increased. In keeping with state law regarding the 2017 budget, we are announcing tonight that the public meeting for the 2017 budget and tax levy will be held Tuesday, December 6th, 2016, right here at City Hall at 7 p.m. Our location is 129 Home Street. And the public is welcome to comment on the budget and levy at that meeting as well. And final approval of the budget and levy needs to be approved by December 28th, and that is expected to occur at the December 20th council meeting. So our proposed preliminary tax levy for 2017 is $18,926,341. This is the same amount that was reviewed and discussed at the work session on September 13th, and this does represent a 7.47% increase over the 2016 levy. And here's a breakdown of the 2017 proposed levy in comparisons to the 2016 levy. We did a couple things differently this year compared to prior years. We're trying to be a little bit more transparent on exactly where our tax proceeds are going towards. In the past, a lot of our tax dollars have gone into the general fund and then into debt service funds. This next year, we're looking to break those out and to really identify exactly where our tax dollars are being dedicated towards. For instance, if you look at the first section below the general fund, we have about $175,000 dedicated to abatements. These are private development or private companies that have come in that have qualified for tax abatements. They pay these tax abatements in, they go into a separate fund outside the general fund, and we then disperse them back to the companies to pay for whatever our agreement was on that end of it. So that amounts to about $175,000. The next item is the capital improvement fund, which in the past we've dedicated, for 2016, we transferred $1.2 million from the general fund over to the capital improvement fund for street reconstruction, street overlay type projects. In the future, we want to dedicate a levy towards that. Our levy for 2017 is $385,000. As I mentioned, we transferred $1.2 million last year. We are anticipating transferring $1.3 million this year, but due to the passage of the franchise fees a couple weeks ago, we're anticipating dollars coming in to offset that. Originally, we were anticipating $915,000. That's going to come in less than that, probably about $750,000 or so. We'll make some adjustments on our CIP side, but we're going to levy $385,000 dedicated to the capital improvement fund. And then below that, we have our debt service levies that are dedicated to each specific debt issuance. We have a couple debts rolling off and one new one with the 2016 tax payments coming on. So you can see the total levy is $18.9 million, and that is an increase of 7.47%.
Counselor Whiting?
I just want to ask a quick question. You said you were going to levy the $385,000, but the franchise fee will most likely be lower. Is that going to pinch us anyway on the capital improvements for next year, or will we just find that money through other sources?
When we reviewed the capital improvement plan back in July, we were anticipating $915,000. Mr. Loney and I will have to go back to that capital improvement fund or plan, and we're going to bring that back to the council for final approval here in October, November timeframe. And we'll look at those projects and probably have to make that work and see how the fund balances lie. But we should be able to accommodate that funding need. So.
And the other piece of that, Counselor, is that as we go through line by line this budget, I anticipate that there may be an opportunity to find money that we currently have that we can then put into that CIP. I don't think it's going to be the full amount that we're going to need, so we will have to make adjustments there.
Thank you.
Other questions at this point? Otherwise, we can proceed. Councilmember Lehman?
The 2012 refunding bond, wasn't that the consolidated bond? Or we put a bunch of bonds together?
I believe we have two bonds that were consolidated into that. One was it was a building, if it was either Public Works, I think it was
Yeah.
the Public Works building and a street improvement bond. And we have enough, why you don't see a levy here is because we have enough fund balance
Okay. for
in that
this-
fund to make the payments for next year.
Okay.
So part of that is a debt cancellation resolution that you'll be approving tonight too,
Okay.
that I'll touch on a little bit later.
All right.
And you also notice that the 2016 abatement bond, and I'll touch on this too, is that for the community center and ice arena is about $2.1 million per year. You can see we're levying about $1.8 million this year. That's due to some of the proceeds we got when we issued that bond. We had good premiums and such like that. So we have some funds that were dedicated to the debt service in that fund already, so we don't have to levy the full $2.1 million because our first principal payment is due in 2018. So we'll levy the taxes in 2016, collect them in 2017 for our payment February 1st of 2018. So it's a little bit on how that works. As far as tax impacts, Scott County has provided the city with tax impacts for residential homestead properties. Residential property values have held virtually steady from valuations dates January 1st, 2015 to January 1st, 2016. The average home value declined slightly from 229,700 to 229,100. Overall, the city experienced an 8% increase in tax capacity for taxes payable 2017. So if our home values remain relatively flat, that means in order to receive an 8% increase in tax capacity, our commercial industrial tax base increased significantly, obviously with new additions and probably increased values, a combination of both there. And so considering that impact of a 7.47% tax levy, the increased tax capacity really offsets that increase in levy and really helps maintain our tax rate. Our tax rate only increases 0.324%. And so our tax rate goes from 37.9% to 38.2%. So it's a nice, fairly level tax rate at this point. And here's a little graph of what that tax impact is on that average valued home. In 2016, that home was valued at $229,700. They paid city taxes of $821, and in 2017, that same home, the value dropped slightly, but the city taxes also dropped slightly by about $9 or so. And I know the mayor asked a question last week to maybe see some different values as well, some different ranges. So I did do a little bit of research with the county this last week, and as that previous picture depicted the average value home, this chart categorizes the city's residential properties by valuation range and also provides the average change in valuation for taxes payable 2017. Even though the average valued home saw a slight decrease in valuation from January 1, 2015 to January 1, 2016, homes valued below the average saw a slight increase in value, whereas homes valued above the average saw a slight decrease in value, or a bigger decrease in value. And so looking at some of the data, and this is data that was compiled of all the residential properties within the city. So this is a compilation of 11 or 12,000 properties compiled into about 8 or 9 different categories here. So I did look at a home valued at about $150,000 on average. And that home value probably saw a bigger increase than that average valued home. So their property taxes will increase about $4 annually or per year for next year. Whereas a home valued at $325,000 saw a bigger decline than that average valued home. So their taxes are actually decreasing $31 on that average. It is important to note that assessed values that you're looking at are assessed values impact are citywide impacts. It isn't specific to one individual parcel. So individual properties may experience ups or downs. I was looking at some of the raw data that was compiled in this graph, and it's pretty amazing that there'll be home values within certain ranges, you know, a $400 or $500 spread, and some will go up and some will go down, and it's all dependent upon where the neighborhood is, you know, the location, the housing sales, et cetera, on that end of it. So this chart summarizes all that data. Your specific home may go up or down relatively to that that value. So
Improvements on the property also. If you make
right,
improvement on the
if you
property,
made
that's
improvements on
gonna-
a property, then absolutely your value is going to increase. But these are considering, this isn't not considering new construction. This would probably consider improvements, but this chart does not include new construction. So you can see the 0.1% increase in value was citywide, so it's basically flat for 2017 taxes payable. Moving on to budget impacts. The general fund, which is a main source of our tax levy, is a service industry and is made up of 70% personnel. So personnel impacts do have an impact on our levy. We have 3 union contracts expiring at the end of this year. Those negotiations have not been settled yet. We did build into the preliminary budget a 3% cost of living. We are seeing with our comparable cities that, you know, maybe it's coming in a little bit less than that, maybe 2.5% to just under 3%, but that'll be all driven by obviously contract negotiations and such. The general fund impact for a 3% cost of living is about $387,000, so you can see it has a significant impact on our total expenditures. Health insurance, we have budgeted about 10% increase, which is about $86,000. We found out last week that we'll probably fall in the line of anywhere from 10.5% to 15%. Hopefully, our broker can get it down to about 11%, 12% range, but as you can see, we had a significant decrease this past year. Our insurance actually dropped. I believe it was 11% or so, and now this next year it's rebounding back up, so.
Councilmember Whiting?
Which number did we put into our budget for the
We
health
put in,
insurance?
we put in 10%.
We put 10 in.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we're just a little on the short side of that as well, so. Staffing requests, there were 4 new positions requested for 2017. The police department requested 1 non-sworn position to serve as an investigative assistant. And the Parks and Recreation is requesting 3 new positions due to the expansion of the police service needs of the community center and ice arena. Internal service charges, these are our charges that we have for rent and for our equipment, buildings, and park assets. Back in 2014, rents were reduced by 20%, and there is a need to, doing some further analysis on that this spring and summer, there is a need to restore those rents to full funding in order to ensure that long-term sustainability. We really looked at the life cycle of all our assets, and our internal service funds are set up to charge an equal amount each year in order to accommodate these spikes that we see when big items need to be replaced, if it's a fire truck or if it's snow plows, et cetera. Those items are quite expensive. In order to ease and not have the big spikes in levy needs, we charge rent to each of our departments. And so we took a 20% decrease in that in 2014. And looking at that, that's fine for the immediate time frame, but looking over the long term, we do need to restore those, and it does have an impact on sustainability if we do not. So I know at the work session last week, council indicated a preference to step into that full funding over a 2-year time frame. We did look at the park equipment or the park asset items, and we were gonna restore those to 100% funding for 2017. And then in addition, we looked at the city hall and community center items, and we were gonna depreciate those at a 35% rate versus a 100% rate, which the rationale behind that is that we issued bonds for a community center and ice arenas, and that we don't want the same taxpayers paying for the community center and ice arena on the debt service and then paying for the replacement of that same asset as well. The users would be, users of that facility or taxpayers would be paying basically twice on that end of it. And this 35% will get us through until those bonds are paid off, until we can allocate more into those items for refurbishment. And I did, so reducing that, forgot to mention one item, that stepping into that rent restoration over 2 years, that does reduce the 2017 general fund impact by about $150,000. So the impact initially was gonna be $663,000, and that'll be about $513,000 impact. Also, but impacting the budget is the EDA. We have an appropriation of $500,000 dedicated in the budget for the downtown area, and this is in the preliminary budget, and this is also the 3rd year of a anticipated 3-year transfer of $500,000 annually. So 2017 will be that final year of a 3-year plan. In addition, there's an exterior grant program within the EDA, and that will receive an additional $130,000 of funding from the revolving loan fund. In regards to the debt service, the issuance of the community center ice arena tax abatement bonds in January of this year does have a substantial impact on the levy. You probably saw that on that first chart where we had the breakdown of the levy, and I do have another copy of that slide after this. But those annual debt service payments, as I mentioned, are $2.1 million a year, and so that does have a substantial impact. But obviously, due to those available fund balances, like we mentioned in that 2012 bond, where we have fund balance available, and within the tax abatement bond itself, we have funds available, so we're able to cancel some of our existing debt, and we're actually able to cancel $952,000 of debt for next year. So that's a significant savings on the tax levy. So that's legal debt that, when you issue those bonds, you're saying we're levying this debt unless we have available fund balance, and we have available fund balance. So that debt cancellation resolution is in your packet tonight and does need to be approved and forwarded to the county as well. And so here's that copy of that slide from earlier. You can see the debt service levies. As I mentioned before, the tax abatement bond is $2.1 million is what we're actually paying. We're only levying $1.8 million.
But Mr. Nelson, it's more than doubling though here, year over year, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Your debt levy is going up 180%, 179.3%. So absolutely, you are increasing your debt levy, but it could be substantially higher than that if we didn't have reserves in some of these funds as well, too.
Oh,
So,
right, okay.
Other budget impacts, other than personnel, internal charges, those rents we talked about, liability insurance, departments will be held at a 0% increase for their other line items, so a lot of their professional services, supplies, other items like that, fuel, those line items that we are gonna enforce a 0% increase across the board on that end of it. We need to tighten up those budgets, and we're doing a good job of dedicating sources to the departments, and so we'll work on that as the weeks progress here. So here's a kind of a 30,000-foot summary of our general funds budget. This is the same budget you saw last week. If you look at our revenues on the requested 2017 budget column, we have $24.6 million in revenues. A little less in expenditures, 24.6, and then we have net transfers out of $450,000, and that's transferred mainly to the EDA. So that leaves us with a deficit of $399,000. Now, take into account that doesn't include the $150,000 of savings from the rents reduction where we stepped into that over 2 years. So we can take $150,000 off that deficit, but that still leaves us at about a $250,000 deficit. And in prior years,
Councilmember Lehman?
And you don't know what the actual percentage increase is on healthcare.
right, but we should be within $10,000 to $20,000 or so on that end of it. So we got some work to do to get our budget where we want it to be. In the past, we have budgeted, if you look at 2016, we had a deficit of $449,000 that we had budgeted. So we were gonna use reserves. In the past, we've had the luxury of having excess reserves at the end of each year, either increased revenues or decreased expenditures or a combination of both. Now with this kind of new budget process, we're looking at tightening that up and doing away with those. We really can't budget a deficit for the long term because it will eat away and erode at our fund balance reserves at this point. This next slide is a listing of the preliminary levy estimates for some of our comparable cities. And as I explained last week, we took a hard look at our comparable cities and really reevaluated what set of cities was comparable to us. We looked at it really from an analytical view. We looked at a number of different attributes, including population, fiscal disparities, contributions, net fiscal disparities, general fund expenditures, employees, comparable service such as did they have an in-house police department or contracted services and such, and really look at it analytically. And then as a group or a staff, we looked at these cities and made some subjective calls on, are these cities really comparable to us or not? And so within that, take for example Savage. Savage really didn't fall within our analytical area of being in the top 10 per se of analytical, but we considered its proximity to us and some of the services that are similar to us and thought, well, that's probably one of those that should be included. Whereas we looked at Prior Lake, which didn't score hardly at all on the analytical piece of it, and really came to the conclusion that that city doesn't necessarily compare to us other than proximity, but they don't necessarily have the same commercial industrial base as us, housing, employment, size of the city, et cetera. So they are not on the list. So as you can see, these comparable cities, these are their preliminary levy increases and what they anticipated to bring forward to their councils. As you can see, Shakopee's in kind of the top third of that, obviously, with our increased debt load this year that would be expected on that end of it. And it goes from a low of 3% in Coon Rapids up to just about 9.7% in Golden Valley. And I should note that when I was researching this, Golden Valley actually is issuing debt too for a community center, and they, I think, have about $18 million bond included in their 9.69%. So here is some more data in regards to historical numbers in regards to our levy, or the increase and decrease in the levy, the tax capacity, the tax rate, debt service load, our total levy and then the total percentage change over the last 10 years. I do have graphs after this, but this is the data that the graphs will speak to. So here's our levy comparison over the last 10 years. The blue bars are the total levy, and the orange line is the levy change percentage. And you can see off to the far right, we have our 7.47% for 2017. Excuse me. Here's our debt service levy load, and as you can see over the last 10 years, it's ebbed and flowed, obviously, and from here on out, obviously, without any new debt, it's going to stay right at that $2.1 million. Here's our 10-year tax rate and capacity comparison. These two attributes are typically inversely related. So as the market value increases, and if your tax levy stayed the same, your tax rate would drop. So your tax capacity goes up, your tax rate goes down if your tax levy stays flat. Inversely, if your market value declines, like you can kind of see this bubble in the middle here, that's when market values decline significantly. And even to maintain, if you go back to that previous slide, we had some actual levy decreases that were negative decreases back in, it was 2011, 12, somewhere in that ballpark. Even with a levy decrease, and if the market's declining the way they are, your tax rate increased by this graph. And so you don't really you have control as a council over the tax levy. You just don't have control over the market value of what goes on in your city as far as market values, with existing market values. And here's a property tax distribution. And this is for a home within the Shakopee School District, which a majority of the city is. And this is for taxes payable 2016 at that average valued home of $229,700. You can see the city and the county pay a little less than a third, the school district a little over a third, and then the other taxing districts such as your CDA, mosquito control, Metro Transit, etc., account for the additional 5%. So with that, staff is recommending approval of resolution number 7771 and 7772, canceling certain debt service levies and setting the proposed maximum 2016 property tax levy collectible in 2017, respectively. With that,
Questions of staff, Councilmember Lehman?
Can we get the 2017 proposed put on the overhead? It'd be the second page in the packet.
this one?
Yeah, and then I'm looking at the actual resolution in the packet, 7772. Resolution 7772, it shows 2004B debt service payment 238,027.
Yes,
That needs to be removed from the
Yes.
Resolution.
absolutely.
And if you move down to 207B for 148.8, that should be 2008A bond,
It should.
okay?
Thank you very much, Councilmember Lehman.
So when I make the motion for that resolution, I'm gonna point out them changes.
Okay.
So, is that,
Yep, absolutely, that's,
okay?
Good eyes, Council.
My wife taught me to watch the numbers.
So, do we have any other questions of staff? If not, thank you very much, Mr. Nelson. Actually, I have a question. Now, if we move forward with this preliminary levy between now and the end of the year, what can we do to help refine this even more? Mr. Reynolds?
Well, yes, Mr. Mayor, that's when we as staff get our sharp pencils out. This is the maximum levy. Obviously, we have, as Mr. Nelson stated, about 250,000 plus or minus 10 or 20,000 that we're going to have to make up that will not affect that levy. My goal is to obviously get us as far down as we possibly can. So we will be spending the next couple months really combing through the budget. We've already had discussions with staff. As you know, we're at 0% for all other than personnel and a few other issues, but that doesn't mean that there aren't areas there that we need to refine, obviously. And just so everybody knows, part of this process is that by really dialing down these numbers even further, we're really changing the culture and the mindset to a degree, because we're encouraging staff to recognize that we cannot anticipate everything that might happen. And a lot of times, if an organization is hesitant to come back to council, we'll pad that. I mean, you know, we'll take those budgets and we'll put a little more in there simply because we don't know what the effects might be later down the road. I'm really trying to change that, so if we have issues that are unanticipated, we're going to come to you. We're going to explain what those issues are. That's why we have a fund set aside specifically for those types of things, and we're going to ask your permission to then change this current snapshot of a budget to what the actual conditions will be at that point, and then ask your permission to draw from that contingency fund.
Well, I know back in late July, we were looking at the CIP, and we lowered that a little bit by taking some things out or moving them a little bit down. Also, I know at our last workshop meeting, we looked at those rents and we made some accommodation to do it over 2 years, which saved $150,000.
Yes, sir.
As a,
Yep.
you know, policy of the council, so that's why I'm asking these questions of what we can see here over the next couple months.
You'll see a lot of staff work pouring through the numbers, and you know, both I and Mr. Nelson will sit down with the individual departments and really tweak those numbers.
Lean, mean, and efficient, thank you. Other questions of staff, Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, as we talked about at the budget workshop, over the next few months, we should be seeing a full-on, you know, department by department, this much is going to this, and here's how it's broke down, fuel or whatever, and so we really can get a sense of that big number broke down to what's actually serving citizens.
And what we'll do, Councilor Lehman, is that once we've done that information, we'll bring that back to you in a workshop where we will then explain what we've done in those calculations.
And we've had that in the past.
Right.
So it makes it easier for me, who's done it that way for many years. You know, what's really changing on the side that I'm not comfortable with yet is the budget side, the levy side, not necessarily how you're looking at each department, because that's gonna stay the same, it's just gonna be more defined, right?
Essentially, yes, sir. I mean, you know, we have to find 250 plus. We're going to look to find more than that, obviously, but this whole process, as I said in the workshop, it's going to take us several years to get this dialed in a little better. This is our first stab at it, you know, but you can expect to see next year. You and I have had the conversation about priority program review process, which will be happening next year, where we will take your overall objectives and then put every program in the city on a big board and see whether or not they fit in one of those slots. And that really will help delineate how the council looks at every program that we do. That will dial it in even more. And then finally, that third year hopefully will be where we're just tweaking it to where we're getting it where it's down to where we want it.
Councilor Lehman, you were gonna make a motion?
I'll offer resolutions 77, 71, and 77, 72, canceling certain debt service levies for taxes payable in 2017, setting the proposed maximum, 2016 property tax levy collectible for 2017, noting that the document on the table had the 2004B listed in Resolution 77, 72 for 238,027, that should be removed. And the 2007B should be labeled 2008A for 148,800. I move its adoption.
Okay. Councilor Mokel?
I will second that.
Excellent. Discussion, Councilmember Whiting?
And I said it at the workshop, but I want to thank staff again, and I appreciate the work you've done on making the budget a little more transparent rather than having these padded values in there so that we can bank some money at the end of the year. I think it's better for the community to see what we're spending our tax money on, and I appreciate the work you've done on it.
Councilmember Lewis, did you have something? Okay. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving ahead to item 9, liaison and administrator reports. Go back and forth here. So we'll hear from our city administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a snapshot of kind of some of the things that you'll be seeing in the next couple weeks. On 4 October, we'll have essentially our final facade improvement program, our exterior program, brought back before you for even more tweaking. Mr. Kursky has spent a considerable time taking a hard look at that, and so he has some suggestions that he'll bring forward, and we'll also be incorporating much of the discussion that I've had both individually with a lot of you, as well as some of the things that we've had in open session as well. And then on 18 October, we'll have our downtown implementation plan. We had a meeting this afternoon, very briefly on that, in regards to paying for it, which is always the most important part. Provided a little more direction to staff in regards to what I'm looking for. And I'm pretty excited because I think it's going to have a real impact in the downtown, and we're going to be able to find a way to pay for it. So that's all I have, sir.
Great. Councilor Mokel?
I did not have any liaison this week, but I did have a LUAC meeting for, which is our land use advisory for the Met Council, and I did want to share a couple of the presentations. We talked about the Mixed Income Housing Feasibility Education and Action Project that was put on by the Urban Land Institute and the Family Housing Fund, and the one thing they talked about was Minnesota's challenge to lower the cost of affordable housing. And the one thing that spoke to me was when we were talking about attracting talent, and that equals diversifying our housing options. And they have taken and put together a calculator for cities to use. It's located at housingcounts.org if anybody wants to go out to it, under the resources tab.
What?
Housingcounts.org. Yep. And this was actually funded by McKnight Foundation. And the Regional Council of Mayors was also involved in this. But they were also talking about making the housing affordable and not necessarily low income. So those are things that I think that we have all been trying to do here in Shakopee. So the other thing that I wanted to point out is our intern worked on a best practices for affordable housing development, and he had interviewed 39 developers and staff within 12 counties. And he talked about what was best practices, and he had a slide presentation, and I did give that to Mr. Reynolds. So if any of you would like that, I can pass it on to you as well. But it started talking about some of the things that we're talking about here, and as we have our new head of developing, I think that's something that we can start talking about. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilor White?
Thank you. On the 7th, Councilor Lehman and I did some interviewing for the EDAC positions. On the 9th, this general scale meeting had a discussion regarding groundwater through some of the Met Council groundwater and water experts. Last night at the SPUC meeting, we discussed the joint powers agreement with Savage. A portion of Shakopee, the Whispering Oaks neighborhood, is supplied by water through Savage, and in 2017, Savage has asked for a 10% increase in what we pay for water from them. So SPUC is looking at a deferment so we can plan on getting water and sewer. I assume sewer, when I've talked to Mr. Loney a little bit about that Whispering Oaks neighborhood. Is there any future plans we're going to be discussing that for developing in 2017?
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, we did discuss that at the CIP, that we would delay a sewer lining project, which is about $750,000, to do this sewer extension, which is about $750,000. So that was what was proposed in the CIP, which Mr. Nelson mentioned we'll be finalizing before the end of the year.
I think the 10% per year got the attention of a few folks, but So there was also 5 outages in the past few weeks. Three of them represented 2 customers, and it was a short time. One on the 14th, in the Eagle Creek area, 36 customers were out for about 40 minutes. And on the same day, on the 14th, more of a major outage on Juniper, Lilac, and that area of Shakopee. 206 customers were out of power for 2 hours, and that was from a delayed lightning strike on a junction-type relay. And that's all I have to report.
Thank you very much. Since our last meeting, our workshop on 9/15, I attended the Community Center Input Committee meeting, and good group. They're getting ready to go into small groups where they're going to talk about memberships and ice arenas, so break out of small groups. The playground was discussed and having some sort of inclusive features, so encourage obviously the company that we hired tonight to take in those meetings and offer that. Over the weekend, served our city in the capacity, went to the La Crescent, Minnesota Apple Fest Festival down in La Crescent, Minnesota, and we had one of our Shakopee ambassadors there in the parade. But that's all I have to report. Councilmember Lehman?
As Councilor Whiting pointed out, September 7th, we did the interview committee. I think we've got one more coming up here. I forgot the date. The 169 Corridor Coalition met, and it was actually a pretty good meeting. One of the drivers at the meeting was all the member cities, which Shakopee is, that pay a dues fee. They're doing a mobility study on 169, and they're seeking input from the people, you know, especially Shakopee between 42 north of the river. So they asked me to relay back to council and staff for information from the city on the impacts on 169. Right off the hip, I told them 169 in 21 area. It's parking lot all the time, so there's some capacity issues there. The contact person would be Lisa Freeze, or the consultant that the 169 Corridor Coalition has. So I would pass that off to Mr. Reynolds, to Mr. Kersey and Bruce, and maybe the PD or who else wants to, probably a staff conglomerate of what our issues are on 169, both good and bad. Try to get that to them in the next, couple of weeks, so that it can be, our concerns can be heard and incorporated into the study. They're looking at either a min-pass lane or a dedicated bus lane on 169, the restriping on the bridge, these types of things. We know we're not going to get another bridge built, so what they're looking at in the study, which was kind of nice to hear, was they want to see what kind of improvements they can make in key areas that have the biggest impact. So, I know the river crossing over here is going to help. The interchange at 41, 169, that's going to probably help a little bit. We did talk about the flooding of 41. I mean, the interchange doesn't do no good if you can't use part of it. So if staff could put that together and get a hold of either the 169 Corridor Coalition consultant, gal, or Lisa Freeze, that would be great. I'd appreciate that. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Lewis?
Last week I sat in on a meeting that you couldn't make and Mr. Reynolds couldn't make with the Met Council. They had a meeting down in Savage. They hit numerous topics, spent a lot of money. It was a very long meeting, but there was a lot of good info. So that's my.
Yeah, you gave me a stack of information that big. I'm still going through it.
What did you spend all the money
on? Thank you all for being active in our community and for our community. Do appreciate that. I'd like to, again, I was remiss in, Mr. Reynolds?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to take this opportunity, if I may, to recognize and welcome our newest member of our staff, and Nathan Burkett, who is a former county administrator and is now serving as our assistant city administrator, and it's great to have him on board.
Well, welcome.
Welcome, and I hope that you gave him the 14-inch dinner plate rather than start him off with a little salad plate.
We're working through lots of projects.
I hope by Thanksgiving he can have the big platter. Nathan, welcome to our community.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Other business? Councilmember Whiting?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, it's not even election season yet, and I drive through town, and I've had a few people mention that some of the temporary signage that we're seeing on street corners and different things is popping up all over town. I'm not worried about the Boy Scout sign or something in someone's private property, but on regular street corners, it seems like there's signs going up everywhere. So I'd like to request that staff look at our sign ordinance and see if that fits within our realm, or if it's something we need to do a little more enforcement on.
No signs in city right away or county
Well,
right away? I know it's been
See 'em bring
a
out
over the last 20 years.
We really have a problem with our sign. Actually, most communities in the United States currently have a problem with their sign ordinance due to a recent Supreme Court decision that, not to get into a lot of details, but essentially for 90% of the communities who regulate by content, the Supreme Court said you can no longer do that. So most communities are kind of struggling to figure out what that means to our current sign ordinances. We have to redo our sign ordinance at some point, once we can get some guidance from different national organizations in regards to what that decision's impact actually means. So we're very aware of those issues. It's an area that we need to tread very lightly on because of this decision, and we will continue to see what we can do.
I'm all for voting for beer, but,
That one's making the rounds
It's
down in
getting-
southern
it's
Minnesota.
getting a little out of hand.
And those signs are very popular, by the way. Councilmember Lehman?
Mayor, I would be in favor of letting other folks spend the millions of dollars to find out what the boundaries are of that Supreme Court decision instead of us spending that money.
Well,
And if I may, Councilor Lehman, that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to figure out, we want some other communities to figure out what the solution is, and then we'll simply steal and take that and move forward with
if I
it.
may, that may be something that some of our organizations, like the League of Minnesota Cities and
Yes, sir.
other metro cities, may
Yep.
have some input on.
All right. Councilmember Luce?
Yeah, I'd like to inform everybody that the in-kind portion of the inclusive play park was accomplished this weekend, so that is all locked down. We're awaiting 3 donors yet, and we're hoping they cover the rest of what we need. We're getting very close. I get a question for Bruce. There's some alleyway work being done up on Atwood, and that was just redone 3 years ago. What,
Yeah, that alley, I think I know which one you're talking about. It was so flat in there, in order to get the drainage out for one resident, we redid that apron to get it lower.
looks like they took one out, shortened it, and are
Yep.
revamping it?
Yep, we had to lower that ramp and regrade it so we can get the water out.
And they're doing another one just short distance away? Okay.
Thank you. And just a special note, Councilor Luce, you've done a great job on the playground. I really, every meeting, try to tip my hat to you and your efforts to make that a very successful playground here, and thank you.
Not built yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Funding is usually the hardest part, so.
Mr.
All
Mayor?
right.
I have one other question.
Oh,
I was made aware of an accident by the or with the fire marshal. I was just curious on if there was a UA done and what other things we might be able to be informed on.
We just got the report on that today finally, and I reviewed it, and I'll be giving it to the clerk tomorrow. I meant to get it to her today. But yes, we have that report finally.
Is that vehicle totaled?
I believe the vehicle, Councilor Luce, I'll have, no? No.
Chief, no?
So I can get that information for you, but apparently not.
Thank you. Are there any other business before this council? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Oh,
May I add
Ms.
one thing?
Polly, I apologize.
Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to piggyback off of Councilor Luce's comment on the in-kind donation. So we're trying to solidify the dates. I just wanted to put it out to council that right now we had tentatively set the community build for October 8th. We're waiting on the concrete part of it, which because of the rain, there's a lot of companies that are backed up. So our alternate date for the community build will be October 22nd. I will send out to council the exact date of when that community build will be, as well as getting volunteers for when that will be.
Thank you. Ms. Paul, Councilmember Luce?
Did the church reach out to you about some special tools that are needed to dismantle?
They did, yes, correct, and I've arranged that with Public Works Department to get them those tools.
Thank you.
Correct.
And Ms. Polly, one more item, I apologize. So, October 7th is a... 8th?
Community build?
Opening for the senior center?
Oh, that is the 7th, correct, yes. Yes.
So,
October 7th from 9 to 11.
stay tuned for details for that. That'll be one of our first pieces to open of our expanded community center, the senior center, and watch for details in the paper and online at our website.
Yeah, and we do have a little blurb on it in our Park and Rec brochure that has the time and the place. So we'll have some entertainment, and some
October 7th.
activities, and some food.
Right, great. Thank you. Okay. I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn to October 4th.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Counselor Moko. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned
That
at
is a new record.
8:03.
That is a record.